$100 bill doesn't mean it is. What that $100 bill means is that people who trade think it's worth an X amount of dollars. I'm mucking that up, aren't I? That there's a difference between the face value and the actual value.
Well, that's right. If at midnight tonight, let's imagine this thought experiment, that the balance of your check account doubles, every monetary calculation doubles. The good news is, oh, great, you have twice as much, the balance of your check account has doubled, your salary has doubled, but lo and behold, the bad news is the price of residential real estate has doubled. So if you're trying to buy, it's just as out of reach tomorrow as it might be today. The prices in the supermarket have doubled. In other words, it avails nothing. It's benefited no one. And in actual fact, because it's deranged people's calculations, they had made calculations on the basis of these are the sorts of prices, these are the sorts of transactions. In other words, that sort of exercise, this quantitative easing, increases uncertainty. What seemed to be a stable price, or one which I'd calculated, look, that seems to represent a decent value. Now it's been thrown out of kilter by producing more money. It devalues the purchasing power of the currency, and then people begin to say, well, hang on, if these blokes are going to continue to increase money, the purchasing power is X today, how much is it going to fall next year or the year after that? Which is another way of saying then it'll encourage people who stand towards the head of the queue to be the first to buy the real estate, the factories, the whatever it is. Why? Because the money in their pocket, the bank balances, the actual purchasing power is going to decrease over time.
If they don't do it, what are their options? If the Bank of England was to say, OK, look, we're not just going to print money.
Yep. It's a horrific option if you're a government official. You have to tell the truth to the population, that our policies over the past 25 or 30 years have been utterly misguided. The policy has been, let's encourage the increase of debt, let's encourage the increase of expenditure. Above all, let's increase the size of government. Under Margaret Thatcher, the size of government increased, certain types of handouts, benefits and whatnot to the middle class. To cut off these sorts of policies is basically to say, gee, when ultimately wealth has to do with an ability to generate a stream of income. It has not to do with a specific number on a balance sheet or an income statement, but it has to do with the purchasing power of that stream of income over time. So that the person who then sees, oh, hang on, such and such is going to pay interest, I'm willing now to save. Why? Because I'm assured that the jam which my stream of income will buy today is going to be a bit more jam tomorrow, as opposed to a devalued currency, which means why should I save today if what that stream of, say, interest payments is going to buy is going to decrease over time? I may as well rush out and just spend a lot today, run down the country's capital stock. So the answer to your question is that it's a fundamental change of mentality to say that it is not it is not consumer expenditure, it is not government expenditure that makes us richer. It is ultimately individual people who are willing to discipline themselves, save a bit out of each pay packet, save from the proceeds of their investment, intelligently to invest it, and see gradually, and there's going to be ups and downs, there's going to be problems, there's going to be miscues, but the critical point has to do with to get through to people that it is savings which will lead to consumption, lead to production, and it'll be that production that finances sustainable, sensible consumption.
So they have to actually make things and trade them.
England are having this debate, Australia is having this debate. One of the consequences of that policy of spend today is basically to provide a great disadvantage or to punish the making things industries and to give a gargantuan leg up to, say, the financial sector, which basically produces nothing tangible but swaps pieces of paper or entries on a computer.
What would be the effect on Australia if England continues to print money? Any? Does it spread at all? Does it affect? It actually may have the effect of making our currency stronger in relation to the English pound sterling?
In relative terms, that's true. And I must say, in the United States, even though this policy in fits and starts has been implemented, the purchasing power in international markets of the US dollar is held firm. Why? Because currencies internationally are backed by nothing but the alleged good credit of governments. It's basically a kind of a round robin, which is the least worst sort of a government. And when all's said and done, the US is regarded as a lesser of many types of evils. The UK is not as regarded as creditworthy as the United States, but more so than Italy, for example, more than Spain.
The UK has normally been regarded, Chris, as a benchmark of sort of fiscal conservatism, hasn't it, of financial or economic responsibility.
The creation of the Bank of England, I think it was in 1694, its basic purpose was to finance England's overseas wars. And that's a fundamental point as well. If there's any Greens listening, and people who basically, and quite properly, morally abhor war, under a gold standard, under a proper currency, governments simply cannot finance wars. Why? Because they'd have to come clean to the people and say, oh, if we want to invade country X, it's in effect going to cost you a marginal tax rate of 75%. People would quite literally burst out into laughter and say, this is patently absurd that you propose to do. Whereas under a central banking system, you can basically foist those debts upon your children. You can debase the currency in such a way that people can't see it from day to day. So when you say the Bank of England has always been associated with fiscal prudence and conservatism, I'll restrain myself a bit, and I'll be very sceptical. I resist the acceptance of that proposition.
My producer has reminded me that in the late 1990s here in Australia, Pauline Hanson was lampooned for suggesting that we could print more money. Would Kevin Rudd or Wayne Swan, the Treasurer, be lampooned if they followed Britain and suggested the same thing of printing money to inject cash into our national economy?
I very much doubt it, for the simple reason that
they wouldn't be lampooned.
No, for the simple reason that as we speak, Merv King, who's the Governor of the Bank of England, is not being lampooned particularly when he says that, oh, this policy, I can't tell you when it's going to work, but eventually it is going to work. People these days give enormous, and I think misguided, trust and confidence to government officials, central bankers. Central bankers are regarded much in the way that the Wizard of Oz was before Dorothy and the Lion and the Tin Man and so on turned up and saw this madman sort of pulling levers and so on behind the curtain. Once the curtain had been removed, once people realize that these are basically conjuring tricks, that they have nothing to do with the creation of savings and thereby production and wealth, then people quite properly, I think, will be more than upset. They'll be as outraged as you were when you telephoned on Saturday to broach this sort of issue and say a sound currency and a government are two things which simply cannot mix.
And somewhere it has to be paid back.
Typically, the way it's being paid back, in a sense, is to roll over, create even more debts, and thereby defer, create more problems down the track at some stage. The trouble, though, is that chickens, whether it's in this country, more so in England, more so in America, in Europe, you name it, around the world, the tomorrow has come back. The chickens have come home to roost. We're trying, or I should say, central bankers, governments are trying mightily to keep the old engine going. That's more and more difficult. They're putting pressure on banks to lend, but bankers quite rightly are saying, hang on, we've already made lots of bad loans. We're trying now desperately to claw them back, and you blokes now are yelling at us to make more loans. So we're being pressured in both senses. In one respect, indeed, it is absurd. You can have the one, you can't have the other, but you can't have banks both simultaneously clawing back what they think quite rightly may well be dud loans, and then extending more loans to people who've already borrowed too much.
They're just increasing their risk.
That's correct.
And endangering their good deposit holders.
Well, that's right. Ultimately, the people who pay, when a currency is